you think the system slipped. That's the moment most people point to. Not the beginning, the shift. When things stopped feeling tight, decisions started splitting, standards started drifting. Execution no longer matched intent, and it didn't happen all at once. It crept in, quietly. Then suddenly, it was everywhere. So the explanation feels clean. We scaled and lost control. But stay with that for a second, because something doesn't quite hold. If control was there, why did it disappear so completely? Why didn't it stretch? Why didn't it degrade gradually? Why does it feel less like strain and more like absence? Most people never question that. They accept the timeline. Early stage is controlled. Later stage is chaotic. Small equal clarity. Large equal complexity. And complexity becomes the culprit. Or AI, or growth. Something external. Something that happened to the system. But look at what actually changed. Not the outputs, not the people, not even the decisions. Look at the distance between intent and execution, between direction and action, between what was meant and what actually happened. At the beginning, that distance is almost zero. You're inside everything. You hear it, you see it, you correct it immediately. Nothing drifts for long, not because the system is aligned, but because you are intervening inside it, so everything appears tight, controlled, coherent. But what you're really seeing is not structure, it's intervention. And intervention is convincing. It closes gaps before they become visible. It resolves misalignment before it compounds. It makes everything feel governed, even when it isn't. At that stage, you don't need a system. You are the system, and for a while, that works. Until motion increases. More clients, more output, more decisions happening without you. And now that distance starts to open. Not dramatically, just enough. A decision here that doesn't quite match, an execution there that feels slightly off, a standard that slips, then normalizes. And because it's gradual, it gets explained away. Growing pains, more complexity, just part of scaling. So you respond the only way that makes sense within that frame. You try to tighten control. More check-ins, more layers, more visibility. An attempt to close the distance again, but the distance doesn't close. It widens because something fundamental has changed. Not in the system, in your position relative to it. You're no longer everywhere, which means whatever was holding things together before has to operate without you. And this is where most interpretations go wrong. They assume something broke, that the system lost something it used to have. But look carefully at what actually disappeared. Not the feeling, the mechanism. What stopped operating? Was it governance or was it proximity? Because if alignment only held when you were present, what exactly was doing the work? If decisions only stayed coherent when you intervened, what exactly was governing them? If standards only persisted under direct attention, what exactly was enforcing them? This is the part that's easy to miss, because early on, the difference doesn't matter. Intervention and structure produce the same visible outcome, so they get confused. It feels like a system, but it isn't. It's intervention, and intervention has a hidden dependency, you. So when scale removes you from the center, it doesn't break the system. It removes the thing that was compensating for its absence. That's the shift. Not loss, exposure. The system starts behaving according to what's actually there. and for the first time, you see it clearly. This is where the instinct to fix kicks in. You assume control eroded, so you try to restore it. More process, more oversight, more structure layered on top. But something resists. It doesn't fully take, even with better people, even with sharper thinking, because by now, motion is already established. Decisions are already happening a certain way. Execution is already patterned. Interpretation is already distributed. The system has learned how to move, and crucially, it learned without something, without embedded authority, without structural alignment, without judgment at the point of action. So when you introduce those things later, they don't land cleanly. They get rooted around, adjusted to, partially adopted, but not foundational. Because once motion establishes patterns, anything introduced later has to compete with them. And this is the inversion, the one that most people never fully make. What you're experiencing as breakdown under scale is not something deteriorating. It's something revealing, not something that was lost, something that was never installed. Control didn't fade. It was structurally there. It wasn't structurally there before motion began. That's why it disappears so completely. That's why it doesn't stretch. That's why it feels like you're trying to rebuild something that won't hold. Because you're not rebuilding, you're compensating. And compensation has a cost. It's reactive. It's continuous. It scales with problems, not with structure, which is why everything feels heavier as you grow. Not just more complex, more effortful. Now introduce AI into that system. Everything accelerates, not because AI creates failure, because AI removes delay. Execution speeds up, decisions multiply, output expands instantly, and whatever was structurally present scales. If alignment was weak, divergence accelerates. If authority was unclear, fragmentation increases. If judgment was missing, low quality output multiplies. And if something fundamental was never installed, you see it immediately. AI doesn't introduce chaos. It collapses the time between absence and consequence. What used to take months to surface now appears in days. So what feels like sudden loss of control is often just the removal of latency. The system hasn't become unstable, it's become visible. Which brings you back to a different question. Not how to manage complexity, not how to regain control, but what actually existed before motion began. Because systems don't scale what you intend. They scale what's there. And if governance wasn't structurally installed at inception, scale won't degrade it. It will show you that it was never there to begin with. So if you're the one initiating motion, setting direction, designing how things begin, the risk isn't that you'll lose control later. It's whether you ever installed it at all. Because if you didn't, scale won't take it from you. It will show you that it was never there.